Why is it that Germans are so good at perfection? Japanese are so good at miniaturizations. Americans are good at making things grand and services beautiful. And Indians are very comfortable with improvisation. Is it that we lack aspiration, or there is a cultural nuance to what we are tending to do? So while the topic of the discussion today is that how small becomes big, what I want to drive your attention to is that how sometimes things which are very big appear very small. Now, if you look at this stuff on the screen here, you would realize that this person is quite big, but this person becomes small in the context. So the elephant, which was not visible to us in the previous slide, is providing the necessary context to this man. And this elephant is again being contextualized with the forest. But what happens is that there are so many powerful contexts that exist all around us. And these contexts sometimes are so omnipotent and so omnipresent that we often miss those contexts out. Let me give you a simple example. Now, I have this American friend of mine and who keeps saying that there is a very fundamental difference between the way education happens in India versus the way education happens in most of the West. So what happens in the Western schools is that teacher poses a question to the children, and then children are free to answer. And what often happens is that answer varies from child to child, from year to year, from batch to batch. So the question remains the same, and the answer keeps changing. But when you come back to India, even if the teacher is smart enough to change the question, the answer still remains the same. Student by student, year by year, batch by batch. Because we have been pretty much told to talk about specific answers. And he says that all these underlying cultural nuances play out in the way what we innovate and what we don't. I'll give you yet another example before plunging down to the very specific institutional nuances that shape the way we innovate and the way we think. Now, the friend of mine keeps saying further that Indians are primarily driven by shame, whereas people in most of the Western world are driven by guilt. For example, tax evasion is a crime by the law in India, right? Whereas intercaste marriage is not a crime. But what are we more comfortable doing? Tax evasion or intercaste marriage? Because tax evasion, everybody does it, hence there is obviously no guilt. But because intercaste marriage is something that might put us across stark in the societies that we are quite shameful about doing it. And that is what drives the way we think, if we are creative or not, and what we innovate. Now, India has by and large been known to innovate on multiple dimensions, and I want to propose to you 3 dimensions. The first dimension where we have proven our prowess is in the space of process innovation. The $30 billion pharmaceutical industry that we sit at today has contributed enormously to the world in terms of low-cost generic medicines. From 1971, where we adopted the process patent, to 2005, where we moved back to the product patent, Indian pharmaceutical companies have actually become one of the leading producers of generic medicines in the world. Same is the case with the automobile industry. Our automobile component manufacturers have won numerous awards, Deming Awards, or whatever you have on quality. And the case with the IT BPO industry, which totals at about $100 billion, which is a good 5% of our GDP, again contributes significantly. So that is one section of innovation, what I call as a process innovation. The second section of innovation is about making good enough low-cost products. In the last decade or so, India has ventured into creating neat products to address the unstated needs of the customers. Of course, you know the fate of some of these products, including Tata Nano and Godrej Chotu Cool. And of course, the Akash tablet, which was sponsored by none other than Government of India. So there's a second type of innovation that we have been doing, which is what I call as a frugal product innovation. And the third type of innovation is more to do with the grassroots level innovation. Here what you see is like this makeshift jugaad, which is pretty common in northern parts of the country. So the word jugaad pretty much comes from having a makeshift solution to a given problem, or this pedaled washing machine, or the famous Mitti Cool now. This is a third category of innovation, what we call as a grassroots level innovation. So we have the process innovation, the frugal product innovation, and the grassroots level innovation. But none of these innovations have unfortunately been able to make a real significant dent in the way we live and the way we offer to the world. And I think that there are very fundamental reasons to the limits to our innovation. And the first and the foremost reason what I propose is that we have really failed to move from a process mindset to a product mindset. Even 60 years of development at the Indian pharmaceutical industry, till date, we do not have a single new chemical entity which has come out of our country. All the Ranbaxy, Dr. Reddy's lab, Cipla, etc., none of them have come up with a single new chemical entity for even our own diseases. The problem with these products, which are created by the large companies like Godrej and Tata's, is that these products pretty much remain good enough, and they haven't been world-beating products. Even after 10 years of investment by Tata's and Godrej in creating the Chotu Cool, we haven't really made the mark from being a good enough to a great product. And the third problem with these frugal innovations, or the so-called grassroots level innovation, which are very beautifully documented by the National Innovation Foundation, have again the same problem, that the solutions available in Gujarat are not known to people in Rajasthan, where the problems are the same. These solutions haven't traveled states, let alone country or the world. Where does the problem lie? And I go back to my proverbial elephant. I think, and that is what is a part of the research, and I want to propose it to you all, that the reasons are not availability of fund or lack of it. The reasons are not availability or lack of talent. I think the reasons are much more fundamental. The reasons are culture. Culture shapes the way we innovate. It defines what we can innovate and what we cannot innovate. And of course, as you all understand, cultures do change. But cultural changes happen over years, if not generations. So the two ways in which cultural shape our behavior is through the formal means and the informal means. And what I mean by the formal means are the formal institutions. Now think of some of the parameters on which India stacks up. While we know that there are so many media channels available in India talking almost everything under the sun, they even end up creating news if there isn't any to fill the space. There are so many dailies that we have. But looking at the press freedom index, this is where we stand. Out of 180 countries in the world, we stand at 140th. This might come as a surprise to many of you. You might be thinking that we are pretty liberal. We are not. Again, coming back to the property rights protection. One of the big reasons why Indians shy away from creating intellectual property and possibly sharing the intellectual property out is because there is very, very frugal, if there is any, protection given to our property rights. If I have an idea and I create a prototype out of it and I take it to the market, I'm not too sure if my government will protect me. And hence, where are the incentives for me to do a product innovation? I'll be skirting on the process innovation dimension or at best business model innovation. Some of the most talked about examples from India like Narayan Hridayalaya, Arvind Eye Hospital, Jaipur Fort, LV Prasad Institute, etc., are built on the fundamental premise of business model innovations and not so much on product innovation per se. And there is a reason to it. They are doing phenomenally well. I'm not doubting that. But are we able to move up is the big question. Corruption Perception Index. Please mind it is a corruption perception and not necessarily corruption per se. Here again, we are ranked in the last section of some of the most underdeveloped countries in the world. Corruption happens where institutions are missing. If I know that there is an occupancy of my property by somebody else illegally, I can take the case to the court and I can get a resolution in the next 2 months. I'll actually knock the door of the court. But if I know that I'll be spending my time and wasting my lifetime if nothing else, and I might see my children fighting the case after I'm long gone, I may perhaps not do that. And I might resort to mafia. And that is what's happening in many countries, including Italy and Russia. And of course, in our own country. Look at infrastructure. The physical infrastructure that we talk about is one thing to say, but another thing is the kind of investment that we do here. Of course, anybody who has come from China can vouch about the development that they have done on the infrastructure front, but we have a very, very long gap to cover. There are more than 850 MNCs in India which have done some sort of R&D, HP being one of them. But these companies have actually pulling out some of their big R&D big ticket investments from India, and that's because of infrastructure. And the last thing is ease of doing business. Will anybody be encouraged, whether it be an entrepreneur or a large firm coming to India, to do business in India when it takes horribly more than 2 months to set up a business? When you have an idea and you want to try it out, you can't wait for 2 months to start a business. So these are some of the factors that make us gravitate towards process innovations, imitations and improvisations. These are on the formal dimensions. Let us look at the way our mind functions. And I'm alluding to this very fascinating study done by a person by the name Gert Hofstede. Gert Hofstede, over the last 40 years, studied cultures of more than 150 countries. And what he identified very neatly is that all countries across the world vary on basically 7 dimensions. And I would encourage you to go back and see if you agree to what Gert Hofstede had to say. It's 40 years of data crossing millions of people that he has, and this is what I'm proposing to you. And he said that the first dimension on which any culture can be defined is the power distance. How much do we fear authority? Do we speak up to our parents? Do we speak up to our bosses? Do we speak up to our teachers? If we don't, then we actually fear power. And in terms of power distance, of course, this is a relative scale. We are at 77. We don't really go out and talk to people. Thanks to the IT companies, at least we are now addressing our seniors with the first name. But in the golden days of the government PSUs, we never dared. We pretty much retired from the company which we are hired to. Yet another dimension is what we call as individualism. We are individualistic people in pockets, but collectivists in mass. And I think that one of the biggest social networks that we ever created was religion. Because religion gave us the power and security of airing our thoughts and not getting sanctioned by somebody if we astray, that is where these networks got created. So we are by and large a collectivist society where we have spikes of individualism. Yet another is uncertainty avoidance. Anyone who would walk on the roads of Bangalore or any other city of this country would quickly realize that we are very, very comfortable with uncertainty. If the flights get delayed, if the train gets delayed, if there is a diversion on the footpath, we don't need any intimation. We can very easily work around. And many people who come from the developed economy to our country find it puzzling that, hey, I didn't see a signboard. And we say, can't you see people going that way? We'll discover the way. We are very comfortable and we don't have any qualms about it. So for example, if I see that this floor is shaking, and it often happens when the table is shaking, what's our immediate reaction? We fix the paper or some quick fix measure. Until the time it doesn't shake again, the paper remains there. It never occurs to us that, hey, now that I'm free, let me see if I can really create a solid solution. A German, on the other hand, might not live with such a solution. And that is what I mean by culture. And the last thing is indulgence. Do we indulge ourselves into good products, great services, or do we abstain from indulgence? Now, to all of us, these might sound like absolute numbers. But when I compare these numbers with what has been the numbers for some of the most innovative countries in the world, and mind it, I'm talking about countries, for example, Israel, Singapore, Switzerland, America, Japan, Germany. Japan for almost the 80s and 70s and not so much about 90s, which was known as the lost decade. We increasingly realize that innovation is a cultural phenomena. So what I'm proposing to you is that because our property rights are not secure, I always fear airing my thoughts. What if somebody runs away to the market? What can I do with it? Because we are very, very conscious about what others think about us. And because we are quite comfortable with living in the zone of uncertainty, we don't avoid uncertainty, we embrace uncertainty at times. We are very, very good at improvisation and imitation. We don't feel ashamed in imitating stuff, in improvising and living with the improvisation for so long. And for as long as we are comfortable with improvising stuff, and for as long as we are comfortable with imitating what others have done, we cannot really aspire to contribute back to the world. The only way we can contribute back to the world is if we start challenging some of our cultural assumptions. Now the question is that, can formal regulations, can formal behavior change informal attitude? And my submission is yes. Think about wearing a seat belt. Till the time there was no government mandate by the traffic police that you have to wear a seat belt, we were pretty okay. And hence we valued our life all that less. But now when there is a mandate by the government to wear seat belt, even subconsciously we are putting the seat belt on. So that has become a second behavior. Same is the case with smoking. The moment people have to walk 100, 200 yards to smoke and go out of the office premise, the tendency to smoke has come down. Which means that formal rules can change informal behavior. And that is the only hope, and a big hope that I have, that we innovate. I'll talk about two examples. That how economic development, and especially the coming in of MNCs into India, has assured a culture of innovation in our country. Two very, very significant developments which have happened in the last 2 decades or so, one is that large families are breaking up into nuclear families. The one very big reason that in India we always used to have same caste marriage is because the same caste marriage used to enable business. When I'm selling some goods to you and you cheat, do I have a court to go to? I don't. So what do? I get my son married to your daughter. Now when I do business with you and if you cheat, there's a social contract. Whenever there is an economic contract which is missing, we substitute that with social contract. But when the families are fragmenting and people are migrating from rural parts of the country to urban parts, these social contracts are getting disrupted. And that is where economic contracts come. And these economic contracts are very, very important for innovation to happen. Because till the time, whatever we innovate has these 3 characteristics of being scalable, of being replicable, and of being understandable, we cannot really export anything worthy of Indianness to the world. And the second big reason why I impress upon having these cities being the epicenter of innovation is because these cities inculcate a behavior of individualism, risk-taking appetite. The golden days of Japan are far behind us. Japan did what it did through continuous improvement, but continuous improvement has a limit to it. I can improve this slide changer only to a point where it remains a slide changer. But the slide changer improvement can never give me an idea that can I change slides like this. From moving from a slide changer of this sort to changing slides like this requires a leap of faith and not continuous improvement. And hence my point is that oftentimes the things that are on the background, which are huge, appear small to us. And hence what we need to do is, at every point in time, challenge the cultural domains that we carry ourselves when we come to innovate. And we need to move from a level of being comfortable with ambiguity to challenging ambiguity, from being comfortable with collective behavior to challenging collective behavior, and from a level where we are okay to do process innovation and improvisation to stretching your neck out and saying that this is the product I have created, and now government, save my product. So that is my submission to you. Thank you very much.